Hello and welcome. Today we're doing a special portrait because you don't need that many colors. I thought on practicing and doing something simple, which I could actually show. You need a little bit of or knowledge of anatomy in order for you to do this. And also a couple of these colors. The first one is sepia, Russian blue, cerulean blue, raw amber, yellow ochre, and scarlet lake, which I actually start. I'm going to explain to you how I started first and then how I developed the painting and the whole mood of it. Mainly the two colors that I use was the blues and also the red. What you see me using here is a mechanical pencil because I try to do things as quick and as fast as possible. The paper that I'm using is actually Artistico, Aquarello, and this is Fabriano 140 cold press. It's actually a very good paper. I prefer Artistico, but unfortunately, now with everything that is going on, I only had a chance to grab onto Aquarello. And like you can see on the exercise, it actually helped me out a whole lot. So I actually start with doing the face. I don't have a specific way of doing it, but I did want to, or I do want to kind of just recap that the eye sockets, that where you place the eyes, have to be even because that basically the eyes is what makes the face, and you want to have their the location on the face. You want to have them at least not perfectly, because us human have possibly a eye little bit bigger than the other, those little imperfections that we have in our face. You really don't have to concentrate much on doing a perfect face, but at least symmetrical, which I'm trying to do here. And then I mark the nose. Since we're working with watercolors, I try to mark also the lights as I go. I know in the picture you can really see much, but that's what I'm trying to do. I'm going to try to explain the process as much as I can. And then of course I'm sketching the mouth. At this point, I'm trying to locate the shadow, mark where the mouth is, and try my best to sketch it as best as I can. I have a little bit more experience, so I feel like with everything that we do or I do, it requires practice. The first thing that I actually like to do is to get a piece of sketch paper and then draw. And if I feel a little lazy, then I just go straight to sketching with my brush. And then I go on to the painting, or start doing the painting. And by doing kind of like these erasers, I want to call it, or practice faces, or whatever you think that it would be appropriate to call them, I then, after the third or the fourth one, then I feel a little bit more comfortable and I do my last, or the actual painting. So it requires patience and it requires practice. And the more you practice, obviously, the better. So right now, actually, I was thinking about something very abstract, nothing with nothing with lines. So I try my best to sketch the portrait. I'm actually using a photo as a reference, and I get ideas and or inspiration from everywhere. I go to Instagram, I can go to Facebook, I go to this one is from Pinterest, I believe. So anywhere that I can find, sometimes I go to Pixabay and get models or people doing different things. I like different themes, and I like to portray like everyday life. But with this one, I really wanted to capture the face, like the look of a person. So this one, I try to find a good picture, which is very difficult sometimes, but I feel like if you have a little bit of imagination, you can, I guess you can kind of agree to put in a little bit of your own twist into it. And that's what I actually had to do. Obviously, the person that I'm actually copying from, or the portrait that I'm copying from, or the is almost like more towards the torso, and her hair is really very beautiful, the way they display it. So I really just wanted to focus on the face, and that's what you see me doing here. I don't like to leave very hard lines, but I knew that in order for me to do this portrait, I had to do a little bit of a more precise drawing, because sometimes the drawing helps you. It's almost like I always say it's almost like the map towards the watercolor. So I really wanted to be a little bit more precise with this, because I've done it a couple times previous to this one, and I really felt like, okay, this is like the last sketch that I'm going to do. I don't want to keep doing this without doing it right. So I pressed down onto the paper with the pencil, which could be a good thing and obviously a bad thing. I usually do not press too hard on the paper because I really don't want the lines to be shown. I want something a little bit more spontaneous, and I also wanted to make sure that I didn't put too much line. But in this case, we had, you have to do the lines with the pencil, and doing that actually helped me to develop the portrait, because I had basically a good map, and I could just paint over it. Doing this type of portraits is actually pretty fun to do. You see me here that I went to look for my colors, and I'm now fixing the lines that I know that I'm not going to be using. So that's what you see me here with a trusty old potty eraser, which is my favorite thing to use when it comes to erasing. It's actually very versatile, and it's very inexpensive. You can get potty erasers anywhere, and that's what I've been using. I really wanted to mark the lines of the nose, because I feel like that's also hard sometimes if you really don't position the nose, because that's what makes the person, actually, the nose, the eyes. And so I really wanted to capture where the light was hitting the nose, and usually it's the tip of the nose. And I also wanted to make sure to portray that this is a younger woman. So I really wanted to make that nose pointy, and make sure that I portray that fresh and beautiful face with a very younger looking nose, I guess. And that's what you see me here. I'm a bit upset because I had a tripod that it was a more flexible one, and unfortunately one of my sons tripped over. And what you see me here, and you see those three lines in there, is actually the shadow from the tripod that I was using to do the portrait. And I don't like it because it shows through, but I think that I pressed down onto not only the pencil but also the paint. When you see me painting, you're gonna see more paint than the actual tripod. So hopefully that's not too much of a bother for you. For this, for the eyes, I actually started creating what we called wet into wet. I'm sure that you heard of it if you already have experience doing watercolors. And I really wanted to, like I said, not to do any lines. I wanted everything to be drops of water. And I started mixing the yellow ochre and I believe it was burnt sienna, together, and I use these colors as like the beginning of the first layers for this portrait. And what you see here is that I'm putting it on the eyes because I really wanted the eyes to come forward and to really tell the story of the artwork. And after I created with the burn with the siennas and the burnt amber and a bit of the pink and red, I decided to go through the entire face, and I did this in different stages. I really wanted to capture each section of the face in a different way, but at the end I knew that I was going to pour so much water that I believe that I could just continue painting regardless. I wanted to have a first laid color and then use this as my base color because I wanted to portray some warmth and some cool areas on the face. For the lips, usually I start with a lot of color, and with this one I just wanted to create a little bit more of more precise with the lines and the shadows of the lips. And I mainly just use the red color for this in basically different washes, different tones, lighter, darker, and then I mix it with the blue. I didn't do anything, and I noticed that by using very little color that the actual portrait came out much better than usual. And it actually gave me more of an idea to continue doing portraits this way. I'm not sure if I will do them the same because I basically did this one with without no hair, and like I said, I just wanted to really portray the look on her face, not give it real shape and form on the hair or to make it look like it was someone. Just the face for me was like the main thing. This video is actually the entire process, just exactly as how I actually hand painted it. So it's actually a long video, so if you like, you can definitely skip forward and see the end result. That's okay. But I just felt that it was important of me actually showing you guys how I do this. And also for those out there who are starting to learn how to do watercolors and will love to do or would like to do portraits, to see how other people do these things. Usually a lot of people start with the eyes and they want to tackle the eyes first because it's the most difficult part. But I actually kind of just go around the entire painting. And also because I use a lot of water, I want to move around the artwork as not just to focus on one place, because I feel it is very important that you want to keep going. You don't want to stop when you're painting. And so that's what I wanted to do. I'm also using some lifting here and there because I knew that I didn't want to blot out or use a napkin for this. I just wanted to use the same brush, and you can definitely do that. By the way, I believe that some of the most amazing or some of the best good paintings out there that you see probably have a lot of lifting involved, and lifting is done by pressing the brush in a very light way, and you can use any type of brush that it will be absorbent. It will absorb that water, and you can press down and lift up. Now, you don't want to repeat that process a lot because it can actually damage the actual paper. So when you want to lift, you want to do it in a, basically what we say, in a delicate way. I had a lot of fun creating these, and I also use rubbing alcohol to create like the bubbles and texture on this watercolor, and you will see that soon I'm actually tilting the paper over. But everything that you see on how I actually used it or did it on the paper is with a damp paper. So everything, every single wash that you see here is actually running. Like, I'm trying not to put too much because I know it was gonna run all over. So in a basically in a little bit more precise way. And then you see me doing the eye sockets. Usually before, I had a lot of problems with that part because you have to understand that the eye is sitting under a bone and it has this bluish purple shadow. But if you add too much of that purple shadow underneath, you will make the person older. So you have to kind of balance the way of how you portray that underneath or eye socket because that will determine how the person is going to actually look. I also wanted to create a portrait where there's like some type of sentiment. Like I wanted her to have this really sad, emotive, I don't know, very, look. And the reason why is because I feel like you also want to convey emotion when you're doing something. You're not just sitting down and laying paint just because you want to paint, but also you want to give those who are actually watching your painting, you want to give them some sort of story. I actually create this with a lot of my oil paintings, and I do this type of emotical or emotional paintings because I want to create that type of feeling. And also portraying basically, our own human behavior on how we behave. And I also recognize that, I was going to use this big amount of red and blues, and I really needed to create something that had some type of sadness into it. So it's actually pretty interesting how you use color in your portraits. And here I'm going to start using the red color. And the red color is actually from my Winsor & Newton pack. And I'm using Scarlet Lake. It's a very deep red, and I like it because it's not like other watercolors out there that are very strong. This one you can actually develop as you go. You can do layers with it, which I actually really, really like. I'm enjoying Winsor & Newton. I always say to everybody, people that start with watercolors, like a lot of people ask me sometimes, what's the best paint out there, or what's the best brand out there? And I really don't have a specific brand because I use so many different watercolors of different brands. I have Artisa, I have Winsor now that I'm actually using Winsor. And I never used Winsor before. Maybe a tube here and there, but not the entire array of colors. And then I also use Schminke and other colors out there. And I feel you just want to, when you're starting off with painting, you just want to grab whatever you feel comfortable with and then see if that's going to give you what you want. And if you don't feel comfortable with those colors, you can graduate to another brand. I really, like I said, I don't like to just give one specific brand because I feel like with everything else, like, have you ever like bought hair color? It's the same way. You have some hair color that have like better green tones or blue tones or whatever, or maybe different types of brand of makeup. It's about the same. Some brands have this color a little bit more pungent, and then other brands have it a little less pigmented. So you have to basically experiment. But as for now, this is what I'm using. I'm using Winsor on Aquarello, and it actually worked out. So what you see me here is actually tilting the paper, and that actually is very, very useful when you're having big washes, and also to do different types of themes. I do it with landscapes, and I do it especially when you're doing skies. If you want the water drops to fall to a certain place, you want to control the paper as well. So I I put the paper upside down so all that water goes down, and that's what you see me doing here. And of course I have this big square brush. I believe is a number 10, and that square brush I use it for to pick up paint. And then now, since I already have an overlay or a first base color, then I start using my red. And what you see during the portrait is red and blue. After that, I don't use much of any other color. I just start using the red. By overlaying or overlapping or creating a first layer, you're creating like a foundation basically to give an ambience to the painting. So that's what you see me doing here. So there's a lifting motion with the brush to places that I didn't want it to be too dark, and then you have like the droplets of red and blue paint, and that's what you see me here doing. Now let's get down to business with the eyebrows. Eyebrows are sometimes are difficult because when I first started, I really wanted to portray every single hair and where it was going to. Sometimes for different artworks, it's good to give a lot of details. But for this one, the same way I'm tackling the entire painting, I did the eyebrows. I really didn't want it to portray like every single hair in there. It's more about the shadow of the hair, and that could also be used for the own like hair. When you're doing hair, we do the same thing. You might ask yourself how to actually gain that confidence when it comes to hair or doing eyebrows and things of that sort. I have, well, most of us, what we do is that we squint our eyes and we step back. And you can use this with oil paint as well. You step back and you squint your eyes, and you'll be able to see the light better. And by when you're doing that, you're actually giving an opportunity to create that shadow and light effect. You want to really grasp onto that. So I step back, I squint my eyes, I look exactly where the shadow is going on the hair, and that's the first thing that I do, and that also helps me with the light as well. So that's what you want to do. You want to squint your eyes and really look for that light and dark. And hair, it's basically tackle the same way you do everything else, light and shadow. I think for watercolors, mainly not only for watercolors, but with other mediums, that's our main goal, to create that light and shadow effect or light and shadow process. And that actually, for me, it's what gives me the joy of creating, because I know that I'm actually grabbing onto that light and shadow. And let's say if you're starting off and you go over your shadow, or you go over your light, due to the fact that obviously watercolors doesn't have a white color, you can definitely lift. If the paint is still wet, you can lift, or you can blot out. So just try yourself not to get so stressed out when you're painting. Painting should be relaxed, in a really good mood, peaceful mood, where you feel comfortable to create and you really don't have an inhibition. And I always, that's one of the things sometimes when we're starting, that we don't want to make mistakes. And unfortunately, in order for us to learn, you have to do boo-boos. You have to throw out a bunch of artwork, because sometimes we focus so much on trying to nail it that we forget that everything gets better with practice. So for me, starting off in watercolors, I will just definitely tell you, try yourself, do your best, try it again and again and again and again until you actually get it, until you actually grab it. Because nobody, I believe, not me, not anybody that I know of, just woke up and say, hey, I did this painting. No, it's a lot of trial and error with everything, until we get to a point where we say, that looks basically that looks more like a portrait. That looks like what I really wanted to convey. So don't get frustrated. So what you see me here is actually dropping the water drops all over. I really wanted this droppy, very loose watercolor feeling, even though it is a very tight, it's a more tight than loose painting, but I really wanted to have that loose watercolor feeling. So you see me doing droplets and you see it going downwards because I'm actually tilting the paper. So don't just when you're painting, you're also exercising. You just don't put the paper in front of you and not try to move it around. Experiment. It's almost like you're creating, so and enjoying that process. That's what you want to adhere when you're painting, and that passion wants to come through, and you see you enjoy it very much because you're doing things with it. You're doing things with the paper. It just makes you feel better. It makes you look, it makes your painting looks more artistic, more worked, you know. And so right now, I was going to explain something about like the eye sockets, like the end of your eyes or the beginning of like the enter of your tear duct. Then the colors, it was something very difficult for me as well when I first started. What colors are in there? So if you really look at the eye, like inside the eye, and I always tell this to my students and people that want to learn watercolors, is everything reflects the proximity of the color that you have next to it. So for eyes, you see that the eye has the lid, the upper lid, the down lid. All of that becomes and creates a shadow inside the eye. And then you know already, like the eye is a muscle and it's moving. It has an eye socket. If it sits under a bone, etc., etc. So you want to create the shadow of the eye. Underneath the lid, there's shadow, and on the corner of the eye. So basically what I'm trying to say is that we don't say, oh, on the corner of the eye is this specific color right there. No, it's the shadow of the lids, the shadow of sorry, the eyebrows, or the shadow of the eyelashes. That's what you're going to convey, the shadow of such and such. And you do this with everything. You do this with still lifes, and you're going to do the same thing. It's basically the same rule for everything. And this goes also, teaches you a lot when you're creating white objects. A lot of people, it's like, how do you do white objects in watercolors? And I don't know if you agree with me or not, but even the white color also reflects the light and the shadow of different objects. So that's how we create the white color of, it's always, they always have a shadow involved somewhere in there, and that's what you want to create. For the mouth and underneath the mouth, there's also, some girls have like this little down, like the upper lip and the down lip, that they have like this a shadow. And I'm actually touching my underlip, so I kind of also know where the shadow it goes. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is like, and this is something that maybe nobody will tell you. It's like, how do you learn? How do you learn to do faces so well? Or how do you learn to actually create a face and not get lost? Or I don't know, like, how do you do this? And the first thing that I first started, that it's sometimes you feel a little like a clown, like stupid, but you first, the best model to do portraits is actually yourself. And I don't know if you ever heard that portraits are actually the essence of an artist. And it's because we practice with ourselves first, and you can actually kind of like feel where the muscles are in your face. And that will give you also an idea when you're creating. So all of that knowledge is actually put into somebody else's, because us humans, we're so symmetrical, like our faces are basically symmetrical, and the eyes are actually falling down, and how apart are the eyes. All of that stuff you can create and you can look when you're creating this. For me, it's better. I feel more comfortable creating females because I am a female and I love portraiture of females. I love that kind of like that very feminine, very romantic, and very subtle that the female does. But I actually also do males. However, I feel much comfortable creating females. I feel like females have, we have a little bit more of a small, narrow jaw, more softer, less what's it called, also the hairs, but it's just more easier for me. I feel more comfortable, and I've been doing this for a while. So every time I create, I'm also using what I've learned from uh, doing my face, doing my portrait. So I think that's a good tip for anybody that wants to learn. The same thing with the corner of the mouth and inside of the mouth sometimes. And I know that I'm not going to be able to cover everything, but in here I use the same rule, which is creating the shadow underneath the lip and creating the shadow that the upper lip creates underneath and all of that stuff. And what's the color? But like I said, I mainly use red and blue. And with red and blue, it's like an universal color for different things, and it gives you a really nice mood into your artwork. And I know it's almost like monochrome, but it's not, because like I said, I actually laid down underneath a first layer of color with actual colors that I wanted to do. And then I was like, no, I want this to have more sentiment, this kind of like this look of sadness and all that stuff. And it actually worked out pretty well. So you see that I actually did the eyes the same way, and everywhere that I felt like on the eye socket, underneath here, over there, I added the blue color. The blue color, it's basically what I am kind of sort of saying, this is where the muscle is, this is where the shadow goes. And so that's how I created this portrait. I hope that this is informative, because it's a long process and it's a long painting. This painting is a 9 by 12 on 140, like I said, and it took me a couple hours to finish it, but it was actually worth it because I really enjoy the process. And I hope that you too as well, and then you learn something, because that's the main thing, just coming here and show you guys what I do is just not enough sometimes. I've always been busy teaching and showing and doing demos with other people. So it's such a pleasure to be able to explain my process here. And I hope that you guys definitely learned something. I was going to ink cap onto what I'm doing now. It's not actually the shadow of anything. It's because the model had eyeshadow on. I was like, should I put it in? Should I leave it out? But I said, no, what the heck, it looks good. And so I added a little bit of a shadow in there. It really doesn't have like there's really no, if you were doing somebody else, or if you're doing a portrait where the person doesn't have no makeup, there's no actually the actual shadow in there, but that's actually eyeshadow, which I thought, you know what, let me just experiment with this and see how it goes. On the nose, the same thing. I added red and blue, and I really wanted to make that. I was working that nose like you have no idea, because I really wanted to create the nose shadow, because I really wanted to create that nose the way it was actually on the picture. Actually, I compared the model with the portrait. Now, I'm using a reference photo not because I want the person that I'm creating to look exactly the same as what I'm putting down on paper, but I wanted to just really look, this looks human, not just to invent something. So the model might not look like the actual picture. Basically, I'm using what we called, I don't like that word, but I'm using what we called artistic license to do different things in the face. One of the things that I actually omitted was not only the hair, but I omitted the ear. Ears is something that a lot of people like to do. I find it difficult sometimes. For me, not very what's it called, like like in a way romantic, I don't know. So ear, for me, the ear was not like a big deal. I did create a shadow of the ear, but I wasn't paying like the whole detail of the ear. I think that for me was more about the face, the actual art of the jaw, like you see here, that shadow underneath the jaw, which creates the actual portrait, the actual picture. And I was focusing more on the face, nothing else. A lot of people have a thing like, how do you know how when to stop, like how many layers does it take for the painting to be done, etc., etc. And I try to not count, but I try sometimes to create artwork thinking about that, because I felt like with me when I first started, I really wanted to know how many layers do I need to do in order for me to say, okay, this is done, this is finished. Because we want, of course, we want some control somewhere, somehow. But for watercolors, I would say between four, three, four, and 4 and 5 layers of color. However, I have done painting sometimes that I've done layers over layers over layers over layers until I am done. But that's something that it's unfair for someone that is starting. So I say practice with like still lifes. I used to put like lemons, and I used to do like still lives, and do a lot of peppers and flowers and stuff like that, and then I counted my layers. That's about, like, for me, for this artwork, I believe that it has over 5 and 6 layers, and the last layers are more watery over. So you have to also understand that watercolor does not dry with the actual color that you submit the first time. That's why I would suggest to always have an undertone. And undertone actually helps you. I didn't know all of this. I actually learned this from an artist, a recent artist that I actually looked online. And he is a master when it comes to undertone. And I never thought, like when you look at that watercolor, I never thought, this comes here and you just paint. No, he undertones his paintings. And I learned this technique from him. For someone that had been painting for quite some time, not to understand that watercolor needs an undertone, it was like, what radical. I knew that, cool tone comes in handy when it comes to art. Like if you want cool tones, you have an undertone of blue, and the other was like a warmth with the sepia and the burnt ambers and stuff like that. But doing undertones or on your paintings will help you tremendously. You will say, wow, she was right. It just helped me develop the painting better, because like I said, I use this as my own map, and the layers that go over that undertone will help you as well. So try to do that. I actually find it very quite interesting, and I learned so much from doing undertones. And what you see me here is everything is very watery now, and I feel like the reason why it looks so dark is because it has an undertone. It has an undertone underneath, and that undertone will not let that painting to look too watery or too light. However, of course, watercolor does dry lighter, so you have to also keep that in mind. For this, and I'm sorry that I'm moving everything, my tripod almost falls over. And everything, like when you're creating these videos, I'm like, Dios mío, I'm just like so clumsy. In the beginning of the portrait, and this is something that I try to edit out. I'm actually using a new app that I have no idea how to do it, but it's actually helping me to do the voiceover. And yeah, so my technical things are not that great, but at least you have like a good demo, a good demonstration, a good tutorial that you can actually incorporate it. Think that this is almost like like a school of some sort that is actually showing you to do complicated things. And I always say, it's hard because you're not like in there with me, like you're not in the studio with me, and you really can see. But at the same time, I feel like the best way of actually learning is by watching, by viewing how other people do things. That's the best way for me. That's how I learn a lot of the things. What you see me doing here, that I'm doing the spritz, is alcohol. I used 70%, I think it is 70% alcohol to do some texture and some bubbles. And you have to be careful. Wherever you don't want to put alcohol and then rework like the area. You just want to leave it there. Sometimes I add a little bit more of color on top of it, but remember that it's like salt. Once you use like salt on an area, you just want to leave it alone. You want to scrape it, leave it alone. Don't rework it because it just erase that texture. So that's what you see me doing here. I also zoomed in right now the camera, so it gives you a better, like I said, it gives you a better view of the process. And you see that I add more shadow on top of it. I know this is not like what's it called, those portraits that have like the hair and everything, but more like portrait that is showing you that with very little color you can accomplish an entire painting, which I don't see often in YouTube. I don't see often here. So something different. I wanted to think that I'm creating something different, something more, say, new and exciting. And at the same time, I feel like, this was a great thing to actually portray for other people to see, because it gave me joy to create this, believe me. So what you see me doing here is now I'm adding even more blue undertone on the eyes. And let me tell you, it's not easy to do the voiceover either, because you're like, what I did now? Oh, okay, I did this. All right. But it's actually pretty fun to create and to show you guys how I do this, or the best of my abilities to explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. I know for us, since the beginning, I feel like I saw my first portrait somewhere and I was like, I'm gonna try it. And I never it was so very, 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 um, very difficult to learn that way by myself. But I try my best to continue practicing. I think that's the best advice that anybody can give, to keep going, to keep practicing. So I also learned something, that when you're creating and you're doing any type of job, like say a portrait, or you're doing a landscape, or you're doing a still life, different brushes for different things. For example, you see that I first started with the big brush with a 10, with I think it's a number 10. Yeah, number 10 round, and then I added a square brush and I lifted with this brush. And then now for the little details, I'm using a very tiny brush, and I'm going to share with you the number. It's number 0, and I actually consider this one of the best brushes out there, but I don't know, maybe other people have other opinions. It's called Utrecht. I had this brush for many years, and this brush is actually very thin and very tiny, and this one gives me that what I need to create like the little details. So I'm using blue mainly for like the parts where I really want that shadow to pop, and like on the corner of the nose in there, I really wanted, like I said, I really wanted the contour of the nose to really be clarified. Like here's the nose, this is the nose. That we have like a bone in there and all of that stuff. And like I said, I wanted that nose to be pointy and youthful and all that stuff. And then I used the brush to do the corner of the eyes here and there. But like I said, some parts of this painting are watery, and so you have to be careful. You have to also, like, if you're going to create like the detail, in different parts of the portrait, you want to make sure that that area is dry. And I have a tip also to show you or to teach you how to know when the painting is actually like that part is dry, is that you tilt the paper over, like you tilt it where to the side where you can actually see. You're gonna see which parts are dry, which parts are wet. It's very easy to do that, and just tilt the paper, and you'll be able to see the parts that are the layers that are actually dry on top, so you can actually feel comfortable. Why I don't tell you like, okay, you can feel it with your fingers, is because you can actually lift paint with your hands. And I don't have much, like I'm not, like my hands are very extremely dry, but some people have oils and dirt on their hands. You don't want to put that, even though of course you're doing it and you want your essence in there too, of course, but you don't want to touch the painting too much. You want to leave it alone. So I just suggest instead to lift to tilt the paper and look at the, of course carefully, you don't want things to run all over of the paper, because remember, we're actually using water. So, and then I just continue doing this and continue doing details and really grabbing onto that red and blue color. Nothing else was used, another color. I didn't use any other color. For the inside, like the aura of Lord, like the inside of like that dark pupil of the eye, I actually, or the pupil basically, I used a very dark tone between red and blue. So everything is kind of like blue with another blue on top of that red to make this really strong purple. And then most of the layers were basically red on top of red on top of red to make it even more intense. So nothing else was used. And actually it gave me a really good result. So that's why I try my best to explain that. And here again, I'm adding droplets. This is not line. I'm not doing any lines. I'm adding droplets onto the eye. Wherever I feel is wet, I'm adding a drop of water with paint to create that. And it actually works out. It looks like mirror, kind of like mirror type of thing. It's very 3D basically. So it's actually pretty cool. I did that line there, and then I was like, oh, I'm doing line here. I'm doing some detail here. And then I go in and I added water because I really wanted to not create, I wanted to paint rather than creating anything with a line. Creating drop, not line. And there you have it. This is the end of the painting. Thank you very much for watching. If you stayed until now, I appreciate very much. Please subscribe and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.